Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And today is Kuumba, Friday, January the 12th, 2024. And we have an informative conversation this morning. And please excuse any of the noise that you may hear in the background. They're having a beating upstairs, and I'm doing this on my break. So, but today's conversation is titled, "Is Kemet pronounced Kumat?" And I say possibly. And our objective is to bring the source of this argument and all that comes with it. So we'll be back in just a little bit to discuss this and more. Peace. And we are back. Peace and blessings, family. And I know it is mad early over here in the United States, starting at 10:30 in the a.m. On the East Coast. So that's 9:30 a.m. Central Time and about 7:30 a.m. on West Coast time. But those of you who are overseas, this may be a reasonable time for our discussion. So I just want to thank each and every one of you who are listening live, and then of course those of you who are catching the archives. And so want to send love and light to those who have made themselves known in the chat, and peace and love to YouTube 91 and our good brother 42 Tribes, as well as Obama is in the building. Man himself is in the building. Peace and blessings to you. Peace and blessings to brother Dasharab in the building. And lastly, Teti Ursuma Ra Sanefaru is in the building. And as more folks come in, I will acknowledge them if I can. And so, let me see. Peace. Yes, Anointed Sadat Ra, thank you. So I'm assuming you on the West Coast. He said it's 7:30 there, or it should be 7:42 there. And it is going to be a very informative discussion. And so, as I noted earlier, the discussion topic asks the question: is Kemet, the place name for ancient Egypt, pronounced Kumat? And again, I say possibly. And the reason why I say possibly is for, hold on one second. Okay, so if you hear the loud noise, sometimes in the building here, they allow, for a lack of a better term, people who are mentally retarded to like kind of clean the outskirts in the facilities and the like. So every now and then you gotta, because he can't speak. And so if you work with special needs, they are always yelling and stuff like that. So please keep that in mind as you're listening to the background. And peace and blessings to Jehuti Ma'at. He says, Shalom. Thank you for joining the conversation. So, as I stated, the conversation is centered around the pronunciation of ancient Kemet, but I want to bring it into context of why this is even a question today. And so, somebody sent me or somebody asked me the question after a recent conversation that Brother Smash had on his channel, where he was critiquing Brother Sheffrin, who brought someone on his platform, and he made this statement that ancient Kemet was actually pronounced Kumat, right? And Brother Smash joined the conversation on Sheffrin's show, and then they had a back and forth about it or whatnot. And so I wasn't able to watch it live, but someone asked me the question and sent me the link, and so it reminded me to do this show because I've been meaning to do this because of, and I think even Smash addressed the online source or the video source of that claim in terms of Kumat. And so it was actually an individual by the name of Metatron who made this video claiming to rebuttal Afrocentric arguments. And so, part of his discussion was on according to him, the overuse of the word Kemet. And then he tried to, correct whoever he was directly speaking to by saying that it was pronounced Kumat. But of course, because he's not a linguist, and he had some other people help him out, but they didn't provide the source material for it. So and people are wondering where this claim comes from, and so we're going to discuss that today. But what I want to do is actually just play the segment of the video, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, so this is the video, and I should have it marked at around the time. So we'll play.
The land known as Kemet, that is ancient Egypt's real name, Kemet, that is ancient Egypt.
I have a plethora of problems with your fixation of the word Kemet, which is also a common trait among Afrocentrists. Now, I myself have used the word Kemet on occasion. It's not that the word is wrong, but fixating on it has zero linguistic standing. Let me elaborate. First and foremost, do you always use the correct and appropriate term for describing a nation? Do you say Japan? Wrong, it's Nihon. Do you say China? Wrong, it's Zhongguo. Do you say Germany? Wrong, it's Deutschland. Also, for reference, linguistically speaking, Ancient Egyptian is an Afro-Asiatic language, and it does not have, for as much as we understand, Southern African origins. It's Kamito-Semitic. Geographically, Asia is physically connected to Africa, which is something that people seem to forget. Also, when you say Kemet, you're using the so-called E of convention used by Egyptologists when they don't know how to vocalize consonants. But the fact that archaeologists use it doesn't mean that that's the correct way to pronounce it. They're archaeologists, not linguists. To reconstruct ancient Egyptian, we need to vocalize it through Coptic and loanwords in Hebrew and in Greek, similarly to how classical Latin has been reconstructed, and throughout the transcription of cuneiform script of the Neo-Babylonian period and Assyrian. Also building with the similarities of the Saïtic dialect, we know that linguistically speaking, the pronunciation Kemet has no academic linguistic dignity. It clearly comes from the Coptic pronunciation Kem and Kemi in the Boairic dialect. The long e in open syllable in that specific position helps us understand that most likely in classical Egyptian we have a U in that position. So if we really want to be precise, then the correct and most likely pronunciation in ancient Egyptian, specifically in classical Egyptian, is Kumat, Kumatu, nominative, Kumata, accusative, and Kumati, oblique genitive. Now let's discuss this hieroglyphic inscription that you present as evidence that Kemet or Kumat in fact meant land of the black, according to you.
So, Kemet, the black land or the land of the blacks? Does it apply to the people or to the land? Probably the fertile soil, and also very likely by extension to the skin color of the originators of those words. Yes, you can translate it to the black land, and as scholars agree, it refers to the fertile soil. The op found a place where Kemet was followed by a man and a woman sitting and 3 dots. So you take Kemet, which means the black, plus people, literally it means the black people.
We have Kemet followed by a man and a woman sitting with 3 dots. This is the determinative meaning humanity, but to you it must mean black people. First of all, the adjectival noun in plural form, Kemetiu, just means Egyptians. Kemet or Kumat just means black land, not the land of the black, as opposed to the red land of the desert. The thing is, though, that if this means black land, and this is people, why can it not be then black people? Well, this is an answer that you don't need an Egyptologist or a fully qualified linguist, you just need a first-year student to answer. Differently from English, in Egyptian, the adjective goes after the noun. It is in predicative form, not in attributive form. So in this language, it makes no sense to say first black and then men and women. If they wanted to say black people, they would write it the other way around. People black. And it just so happens that my language, Italian, functions the exact same way. In the majority of cases, the adjective follows the noun. It's after the noun, and it will make no sense to say, in fact, just like in English, black people. The ancient Egyptians would have said people black, but they don't. When you say this means black people, you're not doing linguistics. You're doing politics. We can both agree with the fact that when we look at artistic representation, men tend to have in general...
I will stop it there because it's going to go into some other areas. But there was a number of things for which he mentioned, but our focus is going to be on Kumat. So when I first saw this, when he first dropped it some months ago, you know, I intended to do a video for it or a series of videos, but he makes so many erroneous and illogical claims that it would take a lot of time to put the proofs together for each particular argument. So it wouldn't a play and stop and comment wouldn't be effective, as effective as addressing each particular major point, or at least a couple of points at a time in a scholarly fashion. So we're going to address the Kumat, because he mentions it again, but he doesn't say where he got it from. And so what I'm going to do is share my screen, and I'm going to share the entire screen, right? And I'm just going to do a full, let me remove that first. And so we're going to go all the way to the beginning. And I don't even think I have this complete, but we'll make it do what it do. So here is today's conversation. Is Kemet pronounced Kumat? And I say possibly, but it's more important. We say possibly because you just don't know. But the timing and the chronology is very important for this discussion. So, of course, parts of this is discussed already in Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1. And, well, this one says on pre-sale now, but it's not pre-sale. It's on sale now. So you can go to my website and get it at this address at asarimhotep.com. So, again, we are talking about the word Kemet. And for those of you who do not read the hieroglyphs, this is the more popular form of the place name for ancient Egypt. And you have this symbol here, the I6 symbol, which has the consonant, which represents these two consonants in sequence, K and M. Then you have this phonetic complement of the owl glyph, which is M. Then you have this T glyph, which is either some bread or a mound. It's still being debated, but it holds the value of T. And then you have this graphic determinative or classifier that is not pronounced in the word, but it's just there to let you know what class the word is being used at the moment. So this is a place classifier. So it's letting you know that this is a place, and that more specifically, it is a place along the Nile, which they use this glyph primarily for cities and towns within Egyptian territory, and other times you'll see it for place names in the duat or the spiritual world as well. So just keep that in mind. So this is Kemet, even though this M is here a second time, it is not Kemet or something like that, right? It's just Kemet. And there goes the yelling again. Hopefully he leaves soon. But so there's a number of sources that when you look online, you'll be able to hear, you'll be able to see, representations of the word Kemet being pronounced as Kumat. And so here's one of the latest. This is a 2021 article by a Dr. Anna Meski. And this woman is trying her hardest to make ancient Egypt the byproduct of essentially Caucasians in the literal sense, and not just the sense of white people are Caucasian myth, but that these folks really come from folks that came from the Caucasus Mountain. So her article is called Cartavilian Languages in the Egyptian Toponymic Dichotomy. And so in this particular and just to let y'all know where the Cartavilian languages are spoken, these are Southern Caucasian languages. And so this is over here in Georgia, Megrelian, just above Armenia and Turkey. And so, near the Black Sea. So, these are the Caucasus Mountains up here. This is literally the Caucasus. So she's trying to make the argument in this text and in some of her earlier work that the ancient Egyptians are people that look like her who migrated down into Egypt and started ancient Egyptian civilization. And so this word Kemet here is representative of a term in her language called Kumat, right? And matter of fact, I can just go straight to her article here, and you can kind of see, some of the connections that she tries to make here. So she tries to argue that the word Kemet is Kumat that you can see right here. But she's citing someone here that is in Hebrew as Ham and Coptic as Kemi, Kema, Kemia in Greek, of course, and in the biblical Ham, right? But she's saying that in Cartavelian languages that it is Kumeti, Kunapeti, meaning very dark. And then there's these other variants, Kumat, Kumati, Kumeti, etc., obstinate, adamant, unyielding, connected. And here's some more Kumeti, the day following the year, January the 2nd, unlucky, blunt, vicious, evil, in terms of the word Kumat right here, bringing evil, fatal, Kumeti, the day following the new year when work of any type was banned for the supper time of the previous day, etc., etc. So she's trying to connect the word Kemet to all these, and these are, it's a pretty lengthy article, about 29 pages, and so that's what you see here, right? So we go back to the lecture here. So she cites one source here. Then when you go on the wiki, this is where you can see the Kumat, Kuma. Why they put a glottal stop there, Kuma, Kume, right? And tries to argue that it has been this pronunciation from the old Egyptian through Middle Egyptian, all the way down to just right before Coptic times. So even in the late Egyptian Armana period, it was Kuma, but it's not based on anything. But the source of this claim actually comes from Dr. Antonio Lupriano. And this is his 1995 book, Ancient Egypt, a Linguistic Introduction. And in it on page 42 is where you will see the conversation where it says Sahidic Kheme versus Kheme or Khemi, Egypt, right? And then he has Egyptian here, Kemet, but then he has Kumat. And he also argues that that K was aspirated, Kumat, right? And so that is that aspiration in the K right here that gives us the Boharic. So, but as I stated to Dr. Obadeli Cambone when he tried to recommend this book to me in our discussion that was recorded, of course, I already had this book and have read it several times and thoroughly. Nowhere in the text does he cite a source or does he demonstrate how he came up with these so-called reconstructions for ancient Egyptian words, right? And you kind of have to just read kind of other articles in the field or other texts to kind of get a sense of what Lupriano tried to do in this text here, Ancient Egyptian Linguistic Introduction. And so, when you go to the Coptic dictionary, when you see the words for black, is the main entries are com with an A and not with the long E or A, or E. so to speak. And so when you see Keme, that's a different word than Kame for black, right? And so Carlton Pust, who will revisit a little later, shows the Kamom to be black, Kame again, Kame black. And so notice that it's not the same, even in with the same uh, phoneme or grapheme phoneme before the vowel here. Uh, it is different than this, right? And so we also got to keep that in mind when we're talking about how Egypt is pronounced versus how the word for black is pronounced in the languages. So in this slide here comes from James P. Allen, 2013, on the ancient Egyptian language, right? The updated version. And so this is from my text, the 2023 Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1. And this is when I'm talking about the Greek mention of Chemion. Um, and I state here that Chemion or Chemia indicates that this pronunciation derives from Coptic, Bohairic, Chemi, and Chemi here that you see here. But what I also note is that this corresponds in many respects to the collagen language, because in the Poku, collagen, Choli, all those related languages, you'll see the form that you see here in Bohairic, but the velar has been lost and only the aspiration. So in Northern Pokut, they say him, right? But in Southern collagen, the H is dropped, the K is dropped, so it's just now emit, right? And this is one of the ways you can prove that it's not black land, it's just a word for land or country. So emit, country, world, earth, landmass. Yemit, homeland, country, state, terrain, region, right? And you got to remember that the collagen people, in their oral traditions, and it has been recorded since the early 1900s when the Europeans first met them, that they derived that they came from Egypt. And so when they refer to the general word for a landmass or a country, they're using the late rendition, more specifically the Bohairic rendition of the word Kemet, meaning country, world, earth, and the like. And we'll see why this is going to be important in terms of these definitions a little later. So this is just what I'm showing here. So I'm showing here that Kemet, according to them, there's an aspirated H, Kumat, and that hu becomes the chi used in the Greek, right? And so now you get a sense for the essential arguments coming from James P. Allen, Ancient Egyptian Phonology. And this is Dr. James P. Allen here. And in the text, he makes the argument that in the early stage, and what is on the right hand side here is just the top part of what's on the left hand side. So that's just a screenshot of the text. I like to have the ebook as well as the physical book. But here it is, in the early stage, Old Egyptian to Late Egyptian, there seem to have been three vowel phonemes, a, I, u. A feature that these stages of Egyptian share with cognate languages, which he wouldn't know what a cognate language is because he doesn't do the comparative method. This system underwent a sound shift during the 5 centuries or so between the late Egyptian and Demotic, resulting in a new set of vowel phonemes, O, E, and E, shared by Demotic and Coptic. So what he's trying to say here is that, again, he's trying to base this off of comparisons with Semitic languages. So the Semitic allegedly only has the three, or at least in Proto-Semitic, only had these three vowels. So he adds these 3 vowels and says that this is found in Egyptian, which he has no way of knowing, especially if if he's not doing a comparative analysis. So he just basically takes the Semitic vowels and juxtaposes them onto the ancient Egyptian. And then he says that the U sound, the U or U, more in a short form, became or E here, which we say E for the symbol here in the Demotic and Coptic times. So if you see, and he says it again here on page, because this is page 73, this is continuing on page 74. So he's saying the primary vocalic distinction between the early and late stages can therefore be seen as U became E, and the introduction to in the second stage, right? So in the text Egyptian Phonology, an introduction to the phonology of a dead language by Carsten Pust, this was published in 1999. He gives a few examples or he gives at least an example. I believe there's another one, but here's just one for you. So what they're doing in this sense is they're looking at other languages that are transcribing ancient Egyptian words, and they're looking at how the vowels are placed in that moment in time. So when you start getting, for example, cuneiform writings of ancient Egyptian terms, this is from the late Egyptian period. And so we always have to keep that in mind, and we'll see why this is very important. So what's happening here is that a lot of these Egyptologists are trying to battle between Coptic being the last stage of the language as a continuum, or there was different dialects and or languages that were being spoken in these particular periods, right? And so at the bottom here, I have highlighted the word. Hopefully y'all can see it if you have a big screen. The word Medu in Medu, as in the word Medu Neter in the ancient Egyptian language. In the cuneiform renderings of the word Medu, they write Mutu, right? And Mutu, of course, the first consonant, excuse me, the first vowel provided is U. So, but by the time you get to Coptic, and so you see in the Sahidic and the Akhmimic dialects, it has this H right here, but that H is Eta in the Greek language, and then of course the Copts adopted the Greek's writing script to write the word Met. So Medu in earlier Egyptian, in the late Egyptian is written as Mutu in the cuneiform, and then but in Coptic it is written as Met, right? So this is why they assume that the U became E and Eta right here in the center, if you can see my mouse, right? And so let me see if there was, I didn't put the other example. I meant to, but I have other examples. So this is one of the reasons why they say. But you know, the problem with this is that there is an assumption that the ancient Egyptian, you know, languages as given to us in the hieroglyphic script is one continuous language. So they look at this in the late period and assume that it's always been Mutu since the Old Kingdom. And so this is why you know, they make these arguments here claiming Kumat, and then it became Keme with the eta as the first vowel in the first vowel position, right? And that there must have been a sound shift from U or U to A. So that's essentially where that comes from. So if y'all want to know the source of when somebody says Kumat, it comes from Ancient Egyptian and Linguistic Introduction by Antonio Loprieno, right? And so what we're going to do is continue the conversation and bring up some pointing issues here. So now we're going to deal with the dialects or languages or evidence of dialects and or languages, different languages in ancient Egypt, and if they were detected by the script, right? So as I've shown before, and some of y'all, this may be a repeat, but especially if you've gotten the book and you've seen this, but there's several different forms of the KM root in ancient Egyptian, and you would have to do an internal analysis to catch these doublets in the language. So when you say Kim, black, dark, Kamim, to be black, dark, the Kamim is actually a partial reduplication with the loss of the voiceless velar in the first consonant position in the second rendering of the word Kim, or so in the second dialect, it is the K has become Z or S. And so this is why you see Zemerwi, darkness, in Chikam B, right? You have Kimi, so-called black bull, Kemet, black cow, Kimiyit, cattle, right? But this corresponds internally to Zemer, wildlife, Simir, wild bull, Shu, donkey. And Sakim, to grow old, and then Kim, arise, to mount up, becomes Simsim, the oldest, Simis. So this is another partial reduplication. In this form of the word here, the M has been dropped, right? So Simes witty, an elder, Semesu, elder, Simes, to be old, to become old, right? And then you have Kim, to accomplish, to end, to be complete, full, Semeru, complete. So you can see here that where there's a KM consonant sequence in the which we're arbitrarily calling Chicom A, in Chicom B, there is a ZM or SM consonant sequence. And this is regular. This is actually common throughout Africa, especially like in Chiluba, Kikongo, and Wolof language. You'll see the interchange. You'll see doublets in the language where there's a first a velar, a K sound, and then there's a Z and S rendering in the first consonant position. So this is right in line with African historical linguistics. So when we go into the Yoruba language, for example, Yoruba has mainly two words for black and dark. And, in this instance, both of them are reduplicated. So we have biri biri, which in the Kan language is biri, meaning jet black. And then you have dudu, like some of y'all may have gotten, the doo-doo soap, the black soap that comes out of that region, to wash your body and the like. And the Akan is toon toon. So the M becomes in front of T. So that's why I say toon toon. It's really toon toon, right? Meaning black and dark. So this is what ultimately becomes Kim Kim, black or dark, or to become black or to become dark, in terms of the partial reduplication. So in the Yoruba language, the nasal consonant has been dropped in both renderings. And you know, we find the same thing going on even in Egyptian. So the Yoruba form dudu, black, dark, becomes Middle Egyptian kuku, wu, darkness, which is in Sumerian kuku or kukuku, to be dark. Songo, kukuku, darkness, right? And these are doublets because in Yoruba, you also have okunkun, darkness, and hara, okun, dark, which would correspond with Middle Egyptian kim, black, kim to be dark black, and also kinehu, darkness, kinemet, darkness, kinehu, darkened cloud over, etc. Sumerian kana, to be dark, gloom, and so these are examples of doublets. So this is just a clearer form, a clearer way to see this. And so just in case y'all want to take a screenshot of it, you can see it more clearly here. But of course we got to prove all things. So I'm showing you side by side here in the Egyptian and in the Yoruba. So remember, so in Yoruba, you have dudu and you also have okunkun or okun, meaning dark and black and dark here. But there's a third variant of the word shu, to be dark, to darken. So but in Akan it's soon, to be dark, right? So this is Kim, black, dark, Kamim, to be black, dark, and then you have Zemerhui, darkness, and then Yoruba A, Dudu, black, dark, and then Adu, one who is very black, jet black. The A is an agentive, an agent prefix, and so you have then Shu, to be dark, to darken, and then the Akan form is soon. And so in the Chikam A again, Kimi, black bull, and then you have Zemir, wildlife, Samir, wild bull, Shu, donkey. Yoruba gives us more clarity on this term. It's Eda, creature, Ede, buffalo, Edu, a kind of wild goat. And these are just terms for wildlife, just what you see here in Egyptian. And so this form here is not, there's another form for snake. It's not black everything. I don't know why Egyptologists continue to just, every single time that there's a word Kim somewhere, they try to make everything black. But you can look at the doublets and the correspondences in the other related languages, and you can tell that it has nothing to do with blackness, because it would have survived as black such and such in each one of the languages and or internally within Egyptian in terms of the dialect. And that's just not the case. So when you have Kim, to pay, total up, credit, profit, duty, Isu, because remember the M becomes W in between two vowels, and there's a sibilate, shibboleth correspondence. Even in Yoruba, we find the same sibilate, shibboleth correspondence. That's S and sh sound. So isu, payment, equivalent to shu, shuayit, trade, shuayiti, merchant, trader, shibu, remuneration, payment, repayment. These are all these consistently correspond. So they're in the original sound may have been an umba, like when you say comb, like comb your hair, and then the sound split depending on the environment. And so, which in Yoruba is ida, payment of taxes, idana, dowry, and san in the second dialect of Yoruba, san, to pay the reward, and showo, to trade, right? And then Kim, accomplish in, be complete, full, semeru, complete, ODD, whole, complete unit, and then She, fulfill, accomplish. So we can see consistently that in both languages, in Egyptian and in Yoruba, there was two dialect variants of these words. So these don't necessarily indicate that within the language that these represent two different distinct dialects, but that they both inherited both forms from the proto language. This is how you demonstrate, for example, that Yoruba and ancient Egyptian derive from the same proto language, because they both inherited both forms of these common words, which could not have been by accident. So this is the process in which you would do that. And here's just some more, just to let you know that, this was not an accident by any means. So, this is for you. This is, of course, in the race and identity in ancient Egypt text. So, you can take a screenshot of this, and so, and this flies in the face of, you can't compare ancient Egyptian to a living language. If you didn't, you wouldn't be able to tell that ancient Egyptian was even an African language, first and foremost. But we'll continue here. So, but one of the points of me showing this is that you can see, like, let's assume for a moment that the word Kemet derives from the word for black, right? In the first vowel position in the Yoruba language, in both forms, and even in Akan, you see a U sound. So do, black, dark. Shu, to be dark, to darken. Akan, shun, to be dark. So this is why I say it's possibly, but my possibly isn't the result of simply just taking in isolation the cuneiform or Akkadian rendering in the late period of ancient Egyptian words. Because if indeed the New Kingdom variant of Kemet had U, and we see this in Yoruba and in the Akan language, then that had to have been inherited. And so one could argue that the U has always, saying been there. But of course, we don't argue that the word Kemet, derives from black, right? And so, but this would be circumstantial evidence here. And so that's why, we go back here. So this is also from my text. And so I state here, we see additional reduplicated cognates in the following forms. So we mentioned okunkun earlier, and okun meaning dark black, but okunkun can also mean a crow, and so can kana kana. So it's also reduplicated kana kana, but with an A sound at the or right? Meaning crow or black bird, but also darkness. And then you have in Yoruba akukau, meaning rooster. And then in Sumerian, we have ukuku, a bird. And again, you see, and this is really should be kukuku. So this is a partial reduplication. But you can see that the vowel is a u. And then in Chiluba, we have chikololo or chikololu, meaning crow, right? And so this, what I have highlighted is a O sound. And so this would correspond with Chikam or Egyptian Sakim, a kind of fowl, right? Or a kind of bird. And so the corpus doesn't say what kind of bird, but it just says a kind of bird. So this is what you see here. Now, and I say, and given our previous correspondences in relation to our overall conclusion, we note in Egyptian, kuku, meaning flood water. And then in Sumerian, kerku, flood, wave, also with the u sound. Yoruba, ikun, omi, flood. And the word kum, meaning to fill, kun, end, terminate, right? Which would be Middle Egyptian Kim, total up, to rise, finish, end, terminate. So you can see that these are quasi or somewhat homonyms. In Yoruba, there's a difference, however. The okun has a low tone on the U, while the word kun or ikun, omi, or kun has the high tone in the word, meaning to feel, and then no tone or a mid tone in the word kun, meaning end and terminate. Right, like these are important. But I also state, so whether there's a U there and you find that U in Yoruba behind the K for black, it still wouldn't mean anything, because you also find the word the U behind K in the words for meaning to feel. So if y'all remember my stance that the word Kemet derives from the word meaning complete, full, right? We're referencing the Nile River, and so that's where that's where the word Kemet comes from. But then we have a third variant in Egyptian. So I say, given our KM and dotted HM and dotted MH, M dotted H internal correspondence, we are confirmed that Kemet equals Mehet, flood waters, Meh, to fill, to be full, Mehi, to be in water, to swim, to drown, Mehet, marshes of the delta, right? And so, I want to emphasize this issue here of dialect forms that have either reemerged over time, not necessarily reemerged, but have converged over time. So what can happen is dialects can form, and then they can all reintegrate at some point in the future, and then that's one way you can get the doublets in the language, right? Or just straight borrowing from a related language that already diversified and whose sounds have gone through mutation. So I want to start some Chiluba correspondences here first. So the KM consonant sequence we can see from these renderings here corresponds to the KM consonant sequence in Chiluba. So Kim, to put an end to, Sikim, to bring an end to finish out, spin, Kim, to complete, becomes Chiluba, Koma, conclude, finish, Jikoma, conclusion. Sikim Kim, destruction, annihilation, Sikim, ruin, destroy, enemy, would be in Chiluba, sound, and Kim, complain, accuse, lament, and demonic is Kimi, to cry out, becomes in Chiluba mukimu, groan, sigh, moan, right? For lament, moan, and groan, Kim here. So this is why when you hear me say Chikam, that KM sequence in Egyptian becomes the KM sequence in Chiluba, and the suffix T in Egyptian becomes chi prefix in Chiluba, right? So this is just one variation of correspondences to KM. But there's a secondary correspondence. So remember that we've already established that KM in Chicom A equals SM in Chicom B. Well, both of these correspond to SL in Chiluba. So this is KM to KM correspondences. Now this is KM, SM, or ZM to SL correspondences. So complete, put an end to, through, complete, in the S, ula, the U. And then in this one, in the word for complete, it's an O. All this is going to be important. So keep in mind, O, U, and Ah in these forms. Kemet, profit, to pay. Isu, payment. Selah, to pay the dowry for a wife. And Salah, price. And then Chicom A is missing the word for lung. But in Chicom B, they have Samir, windpipe lung, Chisulu, Sulu lung in Chiluba, and Kemet, dorsal fin, becomes is empty in Chikambi as far as these forms are concerned. And then you have Musalala, fin, flipper. So these are regular sound meaning correspondences that establish these quote unquote sound laws, right? So this is a second variation, second set of correspondences to the KM consonant root in Egyptian. But internally, so remember, KM equals SM or ZM in Egyptian internally. So we can also compare. So if I say SM, this is exactly me saying KM. And the SM corresponds to M dotted H, right? So we'll just do the first two for the sake of time. And again, you can always screenshot this and compare or come back and freeze it and compare it yourself. So we have Sim, priest, Simwi, a priest, Sim, high priest of Patad, Memphis, Mehi, a priest, Sim, attention, care, help, to succor, Mehi, to care for, to be concerned about, Simi, pasture, Meh, plot of land, field, Semir, God's bark, Mehi, a ship, Mehi, the bark of Sokar, Meh, a boat, Mes, a child, where allegedly Moses come from. So this is the inverse. So the syllables have been switched. So now Mes corresponds to Meh, child, right? All of this is consistent. So these are sound laws that are established. And so this lets us know why the Zemer, wildlife, Zemer, wild bull, Zemerit, wild cow corresponds to just, this word for an animal, this word for crocodile, this word for cow, and that all of these, are just different forms of the same word. And you can see that, for example, the SM root in the word for dog, chisim, and even when they adopted the horse, they used a local name to name the horse. Sisimet, horse, Sim, horse, right? Because it just has to deal with wildlife. Wildlife, more specifically, that could be dangerous, right? So let's continue. So that same MH or M dotted H consonant sequence also corresponds to Chiluba KM. So we've already established that the KM consonant sequence corresponds to KM in Egyptian, but that KM in Chiluba also corresponds to M dotted H. So this is how we know that KM also corresponds to M dotted H, which would make sense because KM also equals SM, which corresponds to M dotted H. So let's just do the first two. Mehi, to flee, Kima, to run, Meh, arm, hand, forearm, claw, paw, Jikomo, fist. Actually, we'll do the third since they're the same. Meh, arm, hand, forearm, paw, claw, Jikama, claw, leg, feet with claws, foot tracks, traces, foot of an animal, trace, imprint, etc., right? And these are regular. So M dotted H is just the inverse of KM consonant sequence in Chiluba. But that same SM and ZM that we did for the M dotted H can also, of course, go to H dotted M, because the H dotted M is just the syllabic inverse of M dotted H. So you would expect, of course, that the SM would correspond to the dotted HM as well. So let's just do the first two. Semi, to report, to complain, acknowledgement, accusation, reporter. Wahem, repeat, report of speech. Do again. Samir, to slay. Zewir, to cut down, to break. Hemen, butcher. Hemez, to slay, to mutilate. Zemir, to copulate with. And then we have Hemes, phallus, and the S is a suffix of body parts, or body part suffix, right? And so, we can see here that this is regular. And then that dotted HM corresponds also to Chiluba KM, or if the or KMB, which I have more examples in the text, right? So, dotted HM, a club, a weapon for beating the wash, Chikombo, travel stick, cane, sign of power, staff, rod, scepter. him, surprise, kima, wonder at, admire, chikumu, exclamation of surprise, astonishment, admiration, jikima, astonishment, him or .hm, crush, press, which would be chiluba, comma, squeeze, close, etc., compress, crush, express. These are exact meanings in correspondences. So you're seeing all of these different variations of the word, right? So dotted hm and m dotted h equals km and the like. So this becomes important again for the dialect conversation. And as I mentioned in one of our previous conversations, our last conversations, I brought up this article here, Dialects in Pre-Coptic Egyptian, Jean Wenan. And, this is just one of his, his argument here. And that is, the old way of rendering the timeline is that old Egyptian in one singular timeline or continuum became Middle Egyptian, Late Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic. His argument here is that Old Egyptian and Late Egyptian are actually one language. And then Middle Egyptian and Demotic is actually one language. And that, it jumped from Old Egyptian to Middle Egyptian to Late Egyptian to Demotic. And then Coptic is really kind of a Creole language, due to a convergence of these and, of course, the Greek language. Right. So this is his particular argument. But as I stated earlier, it's an ongoing debate in terms of how to really handle the ancient Egyptian language. But one thing that they all agree on is that this idea that you see here on the left-hand side is no longer tenable. You cannot say that Coptic is, quote unquote, the last stage of a singular continuum. So they're trying to reconcile the data. And as you can see from these variations here, that there's different forms of words that were inherited and or borrowed into Egyptian from related languages and or dialect interference, right? And so if we want to really kind of understand one form, you look for its other forms in the same language. And then you do the same in related languages, right? And so we have an article by Dr. Raketi Ahmed, and it is titled The Unity of African Languages. And it is in the text published by ASCAC, Kemet and the African Worldview, Research, Rescue, and Restoration, edited by Dr. Malana Karenga and the late Jacob Carruthers, right? And so this is the proceedings of the 1984-1985 conferences. And so in the text, she states the following. She says, well, let me back up and explain it just a little bit here. She was talking about how the stages of the language were not really stages, like in a continuum. Like, like if you have a child, right, that at one time your child was 5 years old, at another time your child was 10 years old, and then another time your child was 15, and then another time your child was 20 years old, right? But they're still the same person that just grew, and we mark these different stages of that one continuous life. But that's not the case when it comes to ancient Egyptian. What was Old Kingdom, middle, what we're labeling Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and Late Kingdom, Demotic, are really essentially different kingdoms arising and imposing their language at the time, right? Now, they could be related, they could be dialects, they could be a variety of different possibilities, which you would have to do the necessary work to hash out. But her argument sheds a little light. So, for example, she says these designations, O Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, etc., however, reflect not so much stages in the development of the Egyptian language per se, as rather stages in the involving political history of the various dynasties. What Gardner called Late Egyptian was the dialect of Upper Kemet, traces of which were already noticed in the Old Kingdom in Upper Kemetic sites. We're going to get to that in a little bit. In dynasties 6 through 11, the vernacular called Middle Egyptian was predominant in Kemet. During the first intermediate period, this dialect spread northward. By the late 11th and early 12th dynasties, so-called late Egyptian forms occur on all types of monumental inscriptions. So Middle Egyptian and late Egyptian were being written at the same time, because uh this is Middle Egyptian time period, but she's saying here that the late Egyptian was being written already in this on these monuments, right? So when the Nubian regime regained power in the 18th dynasty, the vernacular of Upper Kemet spread with the establishment of the new kingdom. Amenhotep II in 1450 BCE composed a letter, and this was during the 18th dynasty, composed a letter to his viceroy in Nubia, and in it he used what has come to be called late Egyptian. In other words, his language was that of Nubia or Upper Egypt, right? And you kind of have to go through this and really kind of read it a few times to get exactly what she's saying. And this is her footnote here, for source materials if y'all want it. Of course, I cited in the book. I discussed this in my 2016 book, Nesubiti, and I have a number of citations which demonstrate that we're dealing with different languages here, right? And so I actually want to, before we even go there, I want to go back to Pust's work. So this is Carsten Pust in the Egyptian Phonology of a Dead Language text from 1999, right? And so what page is this? This is page 27. It's talking about basic information about Egyptian. And so he states here something that is very compelling. He says, from about 1300 BCE on, remarkable linguistic differences can be observed on the synchronic level. Text can either be written in a somewhat archaic language based on Middle Egyptian, or in a more informal language, which probably reflects the contemporary spoken language. The former is called Neo-Middle Egyptian, the latter Later Egyptian. The gap between Neo-Middle Egyptian and Late Egyptian is considerable in both the grammatical and the lexical respects, so as to justify a classification as two different languages. This is important because if you at least have this one prominent scholar in linguistics and Egyptology telling you that based on the criteria how linguists distinguish between a dialect and a different language, the grammar and the syntax and even the lexicon is striking. He says it here: the gap between Neo-Middle Egyptian and Late Egyptian is considerable, meaning the gap, meaning in terms of their function and features in both the grammatical and the lexical respects, so as to justify a classification of two different languages. So this is important because if you are rendering the word Kumat based upon a late Egyptian rendering, based on Akkadian transcription of late Egyptian words, it could not represent Middle Egyptian, because Middle Egyptian is a different language altogether with a probably different pronunciation of the term, right? And this is striking here. So if we go to footnote 5, right? So let me go back up here and read this. So the first testimonies of script in Egypt are attested from the late 4th millennium BC. The earliest documents are usually very short and consist of isolated names and nouns, most of which technically cannot be clearly attributed to a specific language. Already from Dynasty 3, several longer texts are known. Until approximately 1300 BC, basically one language was used for all purposes of writing. It can be subdivided into 2 stages, Old Egyptian and Middle Egyptian. It is difficult to estimate how much spoken and written language differ from one another at that time. From the late 3rd millennium on, we know a very limited number of textual sources from informal, everyday contexts, which show grammatical peculiarities reminiscent of late Egyptian. This suggests that by this time a marked diastratic variation had already existed. So he gives an example here. So, for example, the definite article pa, which is a typical late Egyptian feature, is already found a few times in the late Old Kingdom, but only in utterances ascribed to the lower class people and as parts of proper names. So the language of the Old Kingdom. See, this is why you like I can't go with this argumentation here, right? Because he's trying to argue that the Old Egyptian is the same as late Egyptian, and he's probably basing this on the fact that you find some late Egyptian grammatical features in Old Kingdom period. However, what is missing from that conversation is that this is one of the rare recordings of people of the lower class in terms of those renderings of late Egyptian forms. So that wasn't the same. They're not the same language. So Old Egyptian and late Egyptian, and so if we can say a proto-late Egyptian existed already in Old Egyptian times. So this is why, I go with the people that Old Egyptian and Middle Egyptian are actually the same language. And then, after after the second intermediate period, it's the so-called late Egyptian language folks that rose to power and bring their language into prominence. Demotic may actually be, what they call Napatan Egyptian, right? Based on Nubian folks, right? So these are different languages. And so again, if the Akkadian rendering is of late Egyptian, this would not be the same as the pronunciations and things for Middle and Old Egyptian for the word Kemet. And this is partially one of the reasons why I can't take Dr. Mario Beatty's argument seriously, because what is happening here is that the reason why in actually Old Egyptian and Middle Egyptian may be 2 different languages itself, but the reason why you don't find the word Kemet as a place name until the 12th dynasty, right, even though Middle Egyptian had been spoken, is because the 11th dynasty, because it's around the 11th dynasty, the 10th and 11th dynasty, that they regain control of Egypt after the first intermediate period. So a different group rose to power, and they've always named it this. It's just that different dialect variations of the same word were used by different language speakers at the time, right? So this is why we got to understand that, because the most prominent name for Egypt throughout its entire history has always been ta or ter or tawi, as some people would say. And when you look up the word, it means earth, land, as an element of the cosmos, country, geographic, political, Egypt, soil material, farmland, arable land, a square measure. And we can see here internally that the T because this is nasalized uvular trill, it's a type of R sound, corresponds to KM consonant sequence, right? It's consistent. And so when you say ter, this is a dialectical variation of the word kim in Kemet. Just like the word Mary. Mary is the same in so-called Tameri. And so you have what this is evidence of is a number of related African speakers who had converged, some that been there and some that moved there as a result of the Sahara Desert expanding, the Green Sahara reducing. So, everybody in the Sahara didn't speak the same language. So I don't know why people would expect that all of a sudden, when they got to Egypt, all of those different language groups, all their languages disappeared. That's not how this works. Right. And so remember, I told you to pay attention to those graphemes, those sounds. And so you notice that, the U is what we call a rounded closed back vowel. The O is a rounded closed mid vowel, back vowel. Then you have the open mid back vowels, and then the rounded one is O. And then you have the open, rounded, and unrounded. So on this left-hand side, these are the unrounded variants, of U versus U, right? And the O, and this is versus A. And then you have the normal front vowels. So what they're trying to argue is that there was a fronting going on. So there would have to have been a push or pull chain where the back vowels became front vowels. If we go by the argument of Lopriano, right? And if you want to get a sense of these last back vowels here, so that's called an open back unrounded vowel. And so this is that this is this one right here. This is the unrounded one. And this is the sound that you make when you say ox or cot or swan. But this is the open back vowel. This is the IPA grapheme for the open back rounded vowel. That's this over here. And you can see this like in examples in Yoruba, italju, care, told you, probably from told you or told you, to look after, right? And I just put this at the bottom here for my notes. I'm still investigating to see if these have any correspondences. And this may just come from the word oju, meaning eyes or to look, right? But got to figure out what this T is here. So ignore this at the bottom here. This is just for my own notes to further investigate in the future, right? So if they want to say kumati or kumat, that it would have no bearing because you'll find various African cognates of the word Kemet with u. And so in the Nupe language, we have kun, watering place, but we also have in Nupe kin, land, earth, ground, country, gan, farm. Remember that I argued that Kemet equals Sumerian Kiduru. Notice the U in the first vowel position, damp ground, irrigable land. And, in Chiluba, we have the A, Chikanda, piece of land, field, part of land being plowed in a day. You have Wolof, Kam, water reservoir, still water, backwater, an area where animals and life congregates. And you have Kam, waterway, waterland, right? Which, remember, we did the Kim equals SL and Chiluba, Musulu, river, brook, stream, creek. What do you see here? U. So we're seeing here that there's a consonant, U consonant variant. Then we have a consonant, E consonant, consonant, Ah consonant. So, here you have the back vowel variants, and here you have the front vowel variants. And, we have Dr. Oscar Perfuma in his Histoire culturelle de l'Afrique noire, which was published in 1993. And he gives some variations of cognates for the word Kemet in Bantu languages, more specifically. And so you can see here that these first ones have the O sound, O, because the O also is one of those the rounded back vowels, right? And so we have Kom, country, region, and Balu, Ikomo, Ikoma, city, Okam, Kom, rural area, Komwa, country, region, Bateteka, Kumi. So you have a Umi, country, in Bakweri. In Zulu, you have Kumbi. This would correspond with the hypothesis provided by Lepriano, because remember, he said that the K was aspirated, and this is what became high in the high sound, or be represented by the high glyph in Coptic, which comes from, of course, from Greek. And it has with it the U. And then we have Kumbi, nation, in Zulu, Guma, country, region, Pende, Gumo, village, city, Gumi, rural area, Gomji, land which grows warm and is healthily cultivated in the Oromo language, and Kumadin, Ku, with another with the U. So these are all back rounded vowels. And then we have the A variants for the word for farm, right? And this one, Kumadin, is the word for farm. This semantically goes in this column here, but phonetically goes in this column on the left. So, and then that same rounded back vowel in the first consonant position you see in the word Congo or Chikongo. And as we can see, the word Congo equals Kemet. And we do this, we know this by regular sound correspondences. Right? And so even in Sango, where the second syllable is dropped, and it's just go, gao, right? The disappearance and coloring of the M, which becomes W, and so it's just gowi, like gua. And so what's Kemet, country of Egypt, Keme, Egypt in Coptic, becomes Kal Toro, country, any organized or settled community, homestead, village, hometown, city, tribal community, nation, right? And it's the Ko in Kotoro. And so I won't go through this top one here dealing with the word isiZulu for nation, but I wanted to show this isikumba or izikumba, meaning leather, skin of animal or human, which will be cognate with Kim, black leather. And again, every single time they have Kim, they always make everything black. It's just a word for leather, as the isiZulu language informs us, right? Without any specific color connotation, because you can just make leather out of any cow, but 9 times out of 10 is going to be a dark colored skin, which is why they correspond this possibly with cattle skin. And so no, I won't go through that, but that's that's all I wanted to share today. And so this is where they got the term from in terms of Kumat. And so it's a possibility. It doesn't, we shouldn't necessarily get alarmed. We should more so be alarmed at the fact that Loprieno just provided that pronunciation with no explanation, and then of course without any demonstration, and that's more so what we're always looking for, the comparative demonstration. So I'm gonna try to scroll up to see if there's any comments or peace to Rich the African Elder. Thank you for joining, and thank you for joining Travel Light. He said, why would you use Greek pronunciation? I'm not sure what you're talking about. Let me see. Isn't Greek alphabet at least based on Meta Nature? His explanation seems a bit backwards. I mean, the grapheme used for most of the Greek alphabet is indeed derived from Meta Nature. However, that does not mean that they were pronounced the same. So they're just using the graphemes to represent sounds in their language, right? So just like Latin can be used, the Latin script can be used to write Yoruba, Akan, Kiswahili, isiZulu, etc., without necessarily having to be pronounced the exact same way that you find in the Latin alphabet. He said, "Smash beat the brakes off of Dr. Knock boots." I ain't even gonna hold. He said the mentally handicapped sounds like he is singing Pavarotti. I don't know what you're talking about. She gives the origin of the pathological animus of Europeans to Africans. That's the kind of reconstruction without word Campbell won't say people don't do. And peace to the gods, peace African world, and peace and blessings to Ogun's Machete, and Happy Valley Farms, peace and blessings to you, peace and blessings to Donnie Williams. And I don't know where he gets this "we" from. Peace and blessings to Peter Bias. Hello, everyone. And I already said what's up to 42 Tribes. It looks like Asar has abandoned the Riparianites. And I doubt it. Peace and blessings to Sister Mika. He said, bad connection, brother. Oh. He said, bad connection, brother. We are missing bits here and there. My bad. Is it still messing up now? I know it's going to be a time delay, but if you hear my voice, and please respond and let me know if it's still messing up. And he says, ATL Superstar Show says, what about Tamari? What about Tamari? Are you talking about? Are you asking about how it's pronounced, or whatnot? Let us know. And Mika says, I am good now. Ogun's Machete says, great lecture. Appreciate you taking out. Peace and blessings to Zoo 221 or 221. Hotep, peace and blessings. And so, I will open the chat if y'all want to join the panel, and I'll stay on until about 12:30 or so. So if you want to join panel, hit the link. And Travel Light says it sounds cool now. Oh, nope. There we go. It says the sound is cool now. I do appreciate you, and thank you, Aset Neteru Gaya, for your commentary. And while I wait to see if any of you will jump on the panel, I will indeed play a commercial. Make sure you stay tuned for the Chicom initiative details. And while you are at it, if you have not already, make sure that you that is right. Make sure that you hit the like button and that you share the video with friends and family. He says, all right, Hassan, brother Hassan says, came late. I'll have to watch it again from the beginning. Indeed. And we got the reply from ATL Superstar Show. He says, Tamar, as a replacement for the Greek term Egypt. I'm still not clear, but if you are asking, was Tamari came about at the same time as the word Egypt. Excuse me, not Egypt, Kemet. So they both were ushered in as the name of the territory since the 11th dynasty. However, the word Ta or Tawi was the primary name for Egypt throughout its history. So only during the Demotic time does the word Kemet supersede in usage in terms of text the word Ta or Tawi, right? But there's dozens of different names for Egypt. But one thing is consistent is that all of the names for Egypt have to deal with some kind of relation to land. It's describing the land or the function of the land. And so this is where the disagreements between I and others who tried to link the word Kemet to mean Black people, it's not consistent with what we see in the text and how they name themselves using other terms, even terms that are cognate with the word Kemet. In peace, we have Indigenous Black man in the building. Thank you for joining. And he says it makes sense because in Africa there can be so many languages spoken in the locale. Exactly. Like this, that's something that people don't understand. Like you in a 50-mile radius in Africa could be close to 20 to 30 different languages being spoken. Right. And Egypt would be no exception. Yeah, indeed. And American Dream says Sar, okay. I said Magi were Egyptians. Your thoughts, please. Yeah, they were Egyptians. You know, again, it's we're going to have to get and hearken over the term Egyptian, but I'm saving my responses because I'm supposed to have a debate with Garfield on were the ancient Egyptians Black. So I won't discuss too much of the details there. Zeus said, I got here late as well. We'll have to rewind. Indeed. Thank you all for coming. And great response. I appreciate it. And he says, Brother Hassan has a question. He says, that have been with me for a time. Is it possible by historical comparisons with African languages to review all vowels placed by Rebus system to a closer African pronunciation? I'm assuming you mean, is it possible to review other African languages and to use the most common vowels for cognate terms to be used in the ancient Egyptian language? If that is your question, then that is what I've been arguing for in terms of the revitalization project, because you'll never really be able to fully get all the words as they were pronounced at any particular time in ancient Egyptian history. But if we're going to revitalize it, we can come to a convention, and that's how the reconstructive process is done. So what happens is the vowel that you see the most in compared forms, that is the vowel or consonant that you would use to argue was in the proto form, right? Unless there's some other, reasons not to use that method. That's the primary method that is used in historical comparative linguistics. Now, when you say a rebus system has to deal with writings. And so there's not that many African languages that natively have a writing system that we can compare their rebus systems. So we're, so yeah, the rebus phenomena is in relationship to writing itself, and using graphemes that are pronounced a particular way to write words that are pronounced in a similar or the same way. So that's the rebus principle. But you would need writing for that. And Vernon Williams says, peace and blessings, and peace and blessings to you as well. And Indigenous Black Man said, 11 dynasties during Sesostris the father's reign. Sesostris the first in Dynasty 12. And Sesar. All righty. Just thanks. I thought the Magi were Nubians. The Magi's can be Nubians, but that's just like saying, who should I say? Do y'all know the comedian Godfrey? Right? Like, his parents come from Nigeria. I want to say he is of Igbo descent, if I'm not mistaken. Right? But he was born here in America. By all stretches, but for all intents and purposes, Godfrey is an American, because America is the place. And America is a place that consists of many different ethnic groups that exist. So that's why I'm saying, like, we have to be able to define what Egyptian is. An Egyptian is anyone who adheres and practices ancient Egyptian culture, speaks ancient Egyptian language, and or was born on Egyptian soil. That's it. Like, Kemet to you is not an ethnic group, right? And so what people have a problem is identifying the ethnic group of the first, the pioneering people of the state. And this is where a lot of them is going to fall short. So he said yes. All right. He said, okay, Rashad. Okay, pinpoint. Peace and blessings. Says, oh, okay, at least closer, thanks. Indeed. Does ancient Egypt use Ta Shimu and Ta Mehu after the unification? I believe so. And I don't remember, I can't recall off the top of my head when both of those terms were first used. But that is something that we can definitely look up. They're Egyptianized Nubians. Not necessarily, because, see, this is what people don't understand. Nubia, what parts of what they're calling Nubia was always a part of Egypt. They can't be Egyptianized if since the beginning, part of quote unquote Nubia was in Egypt. So when you're talking about Tasseti going all the way up to Aswan and further up into Upper Egypt, that's all Nubia. Even to this day, when you get closer to Aswan, they say you're going into Nubia. That's where most of the modern day Black folks are. It's in Egypt. It's even in modern Egyptian territory. So they're not Nubians trying to be Egyptians or Egyptianized. They are Egyptians. Just like Mexicans are Americans, right? Like there's Chinese American, there's like Irish American. Like it's confusing for some, because they think that, you know, Egyptian is an ethnic group. Egyptian is not. So, you know, this is where those Moorish conversations come in. Like when they ask you, what's your nationality? Your nationality is Kemet, is Tawi, is Tameri. That's not an ethnic group. It says Kemet was a federation, indeed, and that's the best way to explain it. My community. Is it possible to fully understand our Kemetic language without the full practice of the spiritual and sacred application in everyday living? Are you a spiritual practitioner of ancient Kemet? No. But you're asking two different things. You're asking, is it possible to understand our Kemetic language without the full practice of the spiritual and sacred application in everyday living? You may not fully understand their culture without fully practicing their spiritual and sacred traditions. But there's no way that even in modern times, as much as there are African Americans trying to recreate Egyptian organizations and spiritual traditions, you will never be able to do it because you don't live in those contexts. Like you don't live in a space where all your water derives from a river that hopefully floods, right? Most people here go to grocery stores to get their food. Y'all don't hunt, y'all don't grow your own food year round, right? You don't travel long distance by foot or by boat to do trade. And I'm not talking about you specifically, I'm talking about us in modern times. Like when your family member dies, there's no one in your immediate family that is responsible for caring for the body and putting it into the ground. Like you don't wash your mother or your child's body and embalm them and stuff like this. All of this stuff is what gives rise to the spiritual traditions. Most of us don't have any bulls, no sheep. We don't live on a farm. So you wouldn't have those interactions with nature in a way that would inspire you to emulate or to keep or to find value in certain characteristics, you know, of these aspects of nature. So, you know, people just reading the text are not going to get it, even if you could fully pronunciate all the words. It still would not have an effect on you until you actually live that life, and that life is too far gone for a lot of folks to really understand. This is exactly it. Sorry. It said, would the Nubians say they are Nubian Egyptians like Chinese and Americans say they are Chinese Americans? They say that they're Egyptians, but they are Nubians. Like, I don't know. I don't understand what's so hard for you to understand. From the beginning, Nubia was a part of the quote unquote Egyptian territory. There were many different ethnic groups. Matter of fact, you know, as I discussed in the text, Kemet was actually a federation of Kimwoots, right? Of smaller Kims. It's a confederacy. It's like a United States of villages and cities That's what it was. It's not a like, matter of fact, if I can find the article, you know, and I was reviewing this recently. Hold on one sec. Let me just find it. Because I keep telling folks that, you know, there wasn't even really an Egyptian identity as people like to put it. Hold on one second. Here we go. So I'm gonna share my screen, and hopefully you all can see it. And right, so here is an article. It's called Fuzzy Boundaries, Fetch Script for Antonio Lupriano, who we just mentioned earlier, who wrote the book Ancient Egyptian, an Introduction to the Language and Linguistics. So this was published in 2015. This was a text and dedicated to, and I heard someone come in, and I'll acknowledge you in a second. And so the article which we are reviewing right now is called Egyptian Identity. There's a question mark. Says unlikely and never national. Right? Does he have an abstract in here? No, he doesn't put the abstract, so we'll just read you know, the essential argument. So what Gerald Morris is arguing here is that there never was an Egyptian identity. And you'll have to read the article yourself to check the merits. I know how I'm using the article in the upcoming text, along with some other ones. But says he little knows of England who only England knows. This slightly altered second line of Kipling's 1891 nationalist poem, The English Flags, once served as a motto of the last chapter of Antonio Lupriano's essay. Who cares? Let me skip. While the obvious understanding of Kipling's line is that England as the nation is seen in comparison with international others, and thus quite naturally presupposes a national frame of perception to appreciate an entity like England, I would like to stress the tautological fact that such a reading is only natural if nationality is held to be also a natural frame of reference for identity-related observations. Taking into account all historical and social probabilities, ancient Egypt is very unlikely to be a model topos for such sentiments of national belonging, right? However, as I see it, Egyptology still uses the nation state as the somewhat national frame describing super-local and super-regional forms of political integration and identity. And Antonio Lopriano has not long ago explicitly challenged alternative voices, that is, Egypt is an ensemble, you know, derived from part to be as a nation, which is mainly a theater of a literary fiction. So he's so Lupriano challenges the notion that, you know, the ancient Egyptians thought of themselves in the national sense in the way that we would in modern times. I therefore try again to promote a view on ancient Egypt that does without the national as the misleading analogy for anything that bears traits of super local and super regional investments. This is not to hypostatize the nation as something uniquely special, but to historicize it as something historically unique, and thus an object of historiography. And so, what he's essentially arguing here, and again, it's a whole article, so I'm not going to read everything, is that, you know, this idea that there was an ancient Egyptian cultural identity and national identity is not supported, according to him, by the literature. And there's many episodes or texts which seems to argue, of course, that throughout the land of Egypt, that they viewed, you know, them as other people. You know, they all share the same territory. You all are under the same emperor, but not as the same. So when, you know, you can have an Egyptian as a person who lives, etc., in Egypt, but that does not necessarily equate to an ethnic identity. And so, peace and blessings, Asarim Ka.
And Metatron, Sam, what's good with you?
Everything's all good. What's been up with you,
man? Over here, yeah, you definitely right concerning a bunch of ethnicities concerning ancient Egypt, as we've been going through this, trying to show that obviously people from this part of Africa, hey buddy, people from this part of Africa and other, it's a conglomerate of different Africans that got together to make this culture in the first place, which is what you see a lot of nubiologists coming back to now. The only disagreement I would say is the recreation of it. Yeah. Because the recreation can be done with pretty much anything. And you see ancient Egyptian spirituality recreated in Rome. You see it recreated in Greece. You see it pretty much everywhere. So I don't think so much having to deal with the Nile flood every morning or in the season that it would come is such a big portion of it, so much as the acting out of the spirituality, recognizing the holidays and invoking the play that comes about as far as ritual concerns. Burning incense, pouring libation for your ancestor, writing a letter to the dead. None of that's difficult. Christianity and Islam and even Hebrewisms, they wouldn't be able to be reenacted if that was the case. If we needed, like, oh, we got to have the flood. No, I would say, if anything, we would base it off of Sepdot, because that's the coming of the new year. So you've got your celebration, and then you've got other celebrations such as Kaher Ka, who couldn't make a big Djed column lifted on the 30th day, and you know what I'm saying? So it's recreatable. But concerning those other points, and especially them messing up Kumat, when you've got E.A. Wallace Budge and Bruggish, who said Ka-mit, and you have the spelling Ka-mit, and you're more entitled to have the bull there with the phallus there for the actual spelling, is a Lopriano misnomer concerning the spelling of Comet and their conclusion in the Russian lady. So I definitely agree with you on 3 points and just disagree on the one.
Keep in mind, though, that the Kumat is not based on Ker and Met. And I know that hypothesis from Smash, and it doesn't gel, for the simple fact that the vulture bird is a nasalized uvulatrill, which is a type of R sound, which was definitely in the older Middle Kingdom pronounced as such. And some, like Ivan Lupriano, he argues that it's an L sound. So it definitely wouldn't have been comet or something like that, because it would have been like Kama, it would have been like Kara Lam or Karamat or Karamet too. It wouldn't even sound the same. The syllables don't even match like that. But the Kumat was based on the renderings of Akkadian and cuneiform speakers writing Egyptian words. And words that you saw with a that the Akkadian speakers wrote that had like the word that I showed medu, they pronounced it or they written it mutu. And but that mutu is met in Coptic. And there's other variations, or there's another one where it shows the the u written again in cuneiform, being written in Coptic as o. And so it is from that correspondence that Lopriano and others, as I show, like with, for example, James P. Allen, make the argument that there was a sound shift, which in the from the Old Kingdom to the New Kingdom to Coptic of u becoming e, and so that's why I went in the and there's lots more. I went into a lot more in the 2016 text to show that this could only be representative of late Egyptian, of the late part of late Egyptian, and not Middle Egyptian, because they consider these two different languages, which means that in Middle Egyptian time it would have been spoken differently, or we can hypothesize more likely that it was spoken differently than in the late kingdom Egyptian. And then you have to decide, because there's a group of people who believe that Old Kingdom and Middle Kingdom belong together as a continuum, and then there's some that believe that Old Kingdom and Late Egyptian is a language or a dialect, and that Middle Egyptian and Demotic is its own language and dialect. And so the argument that Lopriano was making and James P. Allen, that from the Old Kingdom all the way to late Egyptian, it was Kumat. They didn't do the work to make that argument, and but in the context of what Metatron was trying to do, saying Kumat, it really doesn't mean much anything, because they're trying to separate it. And it's just like the lady, the Carthavillian lady, they're trying to make these arguments to make it seem closer to forms and ideas in Europe and Eurasia. And I'm like, well, if it was Kumat, that wouldn't have any bearing, because the u is the first vowel consonant, or found in many of the African forms too. So you would have gained no ground on that argument, because we got the same terms with u or o in the modern languages. So that was the essential argument that I was making there.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what Smash's stance is on it, but I've seen the old spelling with the Kemet. And the other part would be, for me, even if we go into the late period, which is your Demotic and your Coptic, you've got Kemet in both. And if we were to use a U sound, it would be like, you never see Usar spelled with a reed leaf. You'll never see that. So it doesn't start with the U sound, right? So they've already messed that up, saying the cool portion.
But no, in Melodic, Asar is spelled with a u, like it's u. It's like usu,
right? Not with
like
a reed
that.
leaf. Yeah. So
But there is a variation of Asar with a reed leaf.
If there is okay. Now, if there is a reed leaf with Asar's name, then it would still be more of the eh sound, which is what we find, like I said, with the Kemi, and with, you find that in the Demotic and the Coptic. So when we talk about just the place name itself, we don't see them saying cool. It's always ke, or it's a ka sound. We don't hear the ku sound. I've never heard it pronounced with the ku sound, and I haven't even seen it spelled with the ku sound. We've seen it spelled ka, mit, with the phallus after. We've seen it spelled
That's just a word for bull. And
No, it's actually a word for Kemet with the
no, it's not a word for Kemet. I saw that, and it was terrible. What
got the
Smash
Nwit
did.
sign after it on the primary. Yeah, so
No, but that's it's a.
I didn't see Smash do it. I actually, like I said, it's in Bruggish
No,
book and
that's
it's in EA
Smash's
Wilder's
argument.
book.
As a matter of fact,
So
he tries to make
we
it.
got primaries for it.
Hold on, he tries to make that argument. And
yeah, now if he's
just to
got
let him
that
know
argument,
he got that argument in here as well.
he got his black like Osiris book. He ready for you, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't got to that page yet. You because I've been driving my truck, but I can pull up EA Wilder's budgets and show it in there with ease. So I know where the primary is at for it, but concerning the pronunciation, it's always Kemi, it's always Ka. I've never seen it pronounced cool or spelled cool in the ancient Egyptian. I've never seen it spelled cool in the Old Kingdom. And I've never seen it.
You wouldn't have seen it spelled like that, because the assumption is, of course, that the ancient Egyptians did not write their vowels. So even and we got to be exact in terms of Metatron's argument.
They didn't write all their vowels.
Well, that's I'm using my words.
Well,
correctly.
he forgets the clenching as well.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. He forgets the clenching as well, and he also forgets a couple other linguistic pros and cons when he tries to make that argument concerning the spelling of it. So
listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying. He's saying simply that he's acknowledging that in the Coptic times it is Kimi or variants, of that, right? Kimi,
right,
Kama, like that. But he goes straight. He said that the more proper pronunciation. This is his language. The more proper pronunciation, was more than likely Kumat, and then he gives these other nominative whatever forms, Kumatu, Kumati, and all this other kind of stuff, saying that before the Coptic times. But this is what I'm saying. Like, he mentions this stuff, but he doesn't say where he got it from, and he doesn't say how or why the argument. So that was the point of this conversation today, to say no, he got that from Lupriano, even though if he didn't know, because his team, whoever his team was, but if anybody has read Lupriano's work, that's that's one of the first things you come across in the text, is his reconstructions for text. I mean, for terms in ancient Egyptian, but he doesn't show you how he derives these forms, these reconstructions or the like. And so you have to do extra work to understand certain arguments that he's just assuming that his audience would know. And he kind of mentioned certain things, but again, there's no clear layout in how it was formulated, his arguments and the like. And so I just want to make that clear, so we're not misrepresenting Metatron's argument on that point.
No, Metatron messed up from the beginning. He messed it up because of two things. Like I said, number one,
turning on his camera was one. Yeah. But then, sorry, go ahead.
No, he says because he's Italian. So we talk about the Demotic, which becomes Italian. So that becomes their original script. That becomes what the Greeks use. So Demotic itself uses Kemi. So he had already shot himself in the foot by trying to say, oh, because I'm Italian. Well, we've got an example of your culture's use of the word here, because Demotic is the script that you guys end up using. So he already has shot himself in the foot, because we know exactly how they pronounced it. So he was out of the classification from the beginning, because if he knows his history, he should have referred to his historical linguistic structure, which is Demotic. So if you go to the Demotic,
we gotta remember that the script and the language are different. Two different things, and they don't have to be related at all, because Yoruba is not related to Latin, but you write the Yoruba language in the Latin script,
right? So
although ultimately it's African, but
that don't save him. That don't save him. Demonic is
understand.
pronounced a certain way. Yeah, we
But,
it's
but
not
this
like
is
we
but
don't know the
this is this
pronunciation of
is
how demonic works.
this is the fundamental issue here, is that he, Metatron, is trying to make a point that isn't a point. Like it
Well,
was
yeah,
a
we know
waste
that.
of time in terms of the video. So like, you're so fixated on Kemet, but really it's pronounced Kumat.
Right.
Like Negro, like that that was nothing. Like you acknowledge where they got it from. We say Kemet because of Coptic. It's just simple as that. And so we understand that you stick the e's even without the Coptic pronunciation, that the convention is to stick the e's in between the consonants so that we can speak to one another when referencing ancient Egyptian words. This is all basic information that everyone knows or should know, right? Like it was a point that wasn't a point. It did nothing for the video, right? It's not African, it's an Afroasiatic language. Where does the Afro and the Afroasiatic come from? Like it's just the whole video was stupid, and
See, you make
there's
that
like
point right there, and it's so funny because they and this is part of why they won't validate Eric's work is because what you keep going outside of the Afro. You want to use Boharic, Sahidic, and everything but the African languages to validate Afro-Asiatic, and that becomes the problem. So when you suggest that we take the Asiatic out of it and rename it, I've always agreed. We've always had that same argument.
I
He's
say get
silly.
rid of the whole Afroasiatic period. But that's a different argument. But even to the point, like Afroasiatic consists of allegedly ancient Egyptian, Berber, Semitic, Chadic, Omatic, and Chittic, right?
Yeah,
Only Semitic exists outside of Africa, except in
right.
recent times as a result of Arabs and
Arabic. Yeah,
slavery, right? And so all the other languages exist only in Africa, but you're trying to, including ancient Egyptian.
right.
But
So that's the whole point. If we're gonna find cognates that make sense to make this a validated vowel formation for the Medu Neter language, you have to go to Africa because those are the clans that made up ancient Egypt. Why would we be looking for its derivatives, which are your Boharic and Sahidic, meaning that those are the results of Medu Neter being spoken. You have other language formed after them. You need to go to the languages that probably created them, which, when you talk about languages like Ma'a from the Maasai, or you talk about some of the Chikongo languages because you can find Twa people there. You know what I'm saying? You have to go to the languages that are in Africa in order to validate Afro-Asiatic, not just being a pseudo language as they call it or whatever. So I don't know why. Well, we know exactly why, because scientific racism at the time pushed them outside of Africa to look for the cognates in this language. But no, just come back into the whole of Africa, and this can be easily figured out. And that's what most of us are doing the work on now. So
I don't believe you. First of all, this lady here says that the ancient Egyptians came from the Caucasus Mountains right here. So why no ancient Egyptian related languages over here? But so
Georgia.
and she's a professor at Caucasus University, so she's the expert. She got the PhD. So you need to take this up with her. Cartavelian languages and the Egyptian toponymic dichotomy. Kemet and Desheret is both Cartavelian, a Southern Caucasian language, right? Coming from this area. So it's related to Russian and everything around here. That's what she said. So all that Africa stuff that you talking, that ain't what the experts in Caucasus land is saying. So you got to take that up with them.
And we got the Black Sea right next to it to prove it. That's the big black. Wow. She is wilding out. That is funny. So what, she put this book out when?
Well, it's a series of articles. I'm not sure she has a book per se, but that's an article that I just showed, or at least a screenshot of.
She looks familiar, like she was on the University of Chicago's video recently. I need to check her out. I might have to go in on her. That's terrible. That is terrible.
Yeah. See, people be wondering why I be like so gun ho on details and methods, because y'all don't know what arguments are out there. And this is 2021. That article was 2021. That's not 1933 or 1898. You can't say, well, that was them back then. It was, it's all good now. If you take Unc's perspective on things, all science is just value free now and objective, and there's nobody trying to take Egypt out of Africa today.
Mm-hmm. Right. And everyone is just humans, and we can just solve it.
No, that's not how this happens.
Mm-mm. Scientific racism still exists, and that's why we got to fight that good fight. Let me get off of here, though, brother. Good show.
Appreciate it. I got to go myself. I got to get back to work. I'm on break. But had to come in and at least put that in the internet so people will know where to look for that argument. But I do appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate all of you who are in the chat. Sorry I didn't get to all of your questions. If you stated some since the last few moments, but I do appreciate each and every one of you. And until next time, peace.
Tokyo wanna dose that. What's up? Feeling like I dropped the draw for and caught Uno. Came to kick the door where the game man judo. Pin game low, that's why they give me kudos. Inspired by the 3-0. 595, check it for pack light. Hit the turnpike, slide to a baseline. Gotta sound like I just hit the 85. Oh, I'm so ready, by enemies necessary. We gon' be legendary, hold up. About to grow the payrolls. If you see the vision and you're with it, you should say so. Cause we about building, elevating the millions.
This program was created with the love and support of all our Patreon members and subscribers. If you are not a member yet and would like to see more content like this, consider becoming a member today. The link is in the description of this video. Your support is greatly appreciated.